This is a rule of law issue. Matter of fact, it's more than a specific rule of law. This is talking about the Constitution as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm.
And this one comes out of the wonderful state of Illinois. Title: Undocumented immigrants have right to own guns, judge rules.
Hmm.
Again, this is March of this year. This is an old story. It goes back to 2020. But a judge this month, I'm reading an article here from Newsweek. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I don't always go to the conservative sources. I go to middle of the road or Newsweek that I think leans one way or the other or not right. A judge this month dropped gun charges against an illegal migrant. By the way, this article said illegal. I wonder if I have to apologize for that.
Hmm.
Sorry, couldn't help myself. An illegal migrant in Illinois, sparking further debate about the rights associated with the Second Amendment. U.S. District Court Judge Sharon Coleman of the Northern District of Illinois referenced lower court rulings in dismissing firearm possession charges against Heriberto Carbajal-Flores, who was illegally or unlawfully in the United States when he possessed a handgun in the Little Village neighborhood of Chicago on June 1st, 2020. Now, why is this so important? This is so
Hmm.
important because, in short, federal law, federal law prohibits, it bans, it does not allow a non-US citizen the right to possess firearms in this country. In other words, federal law has supported the notion that the Bill of Rights, in this case specifically the Second Amendment, only applies to US citizens. Now, before I have you chime in your books, I really want to get your take on this, and I'm going to give you my take about the motivation behind this ruling in a second. But this doesn't mean that an illegal immigrant or someone on vacation here doesn't have the right to be treated the same way under the laws here that we do. In other words, if someone is robbed here or someone were to be denied entry into an establishment because of their race and they're not a US citizen or they're here visiting, whatever, all of the protections would attach to them as it does a citizen, in my opinion, based on what
Hmm.
I've read on statute and settled law and things like that. However, people cannot claim the rights of the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, on their own unless they are US citizens. Now, Bill, I want to get your take on this
Yeah.
before we move on.
So, Mark, you're a strict interpretationalist. You're a strict interpretationalist, and you're saying that there is a law that says, is this in the Constitution that you have to be a U.S. citizen, or
No,
is
that's
this
why I said that it's federal law, and I should have
it's
actually
so
cited
so
it.
there's a federal law that contradicts,
By the way, I have it right here. It's Title 18,
right? So
US Criminal Code.
so there's a federal law that contradicts the Constitution, and we're okay with that? So you're saying he shouldn't be that the second so my understanding of the Second Amendment is the Second Amendment's the Second Amendment. It's really, I know there's a lot of refinements put on it, and I'm not saying I disagree with some of them, but let's not lose sight, especially you as a strict interpretationalist of the
Mhm.
Constitution. There's a law on the books that's in, I don't want to say violation, in contradiction to the Second Amendment. And this judge has said that's in contradiction to the Second Amendment. And we're going to take issue with that.
Yeah, I take issue with it because the code, in my opinion, is not in contradiction. It's not in conflict with the Constitution. Here's why. Again, we're talking specifically here about the Second Amendment because the Second Amendment
Mhm.
articulates specifically, it says the people. And when you read the word the people in the context of the Declaration of Independence and the rest of the Constitution, starting Article 1 and moving on down, the people refers to individuals who are citizens of the United States. The people is not referring to the population of Earth. It is
Right.
referring specifically and solely to US citizens, plain and simple.
I mean, what did
That's
it
why
mean,
this is
Mark?
not in
What did it
conflict.
mean to be a U.S. citizen in 1776? Well, I
And
mean, What did it mean to be U.S. citizens? Was there a complex immigration hurdles to get over to become a U.S. citizen? Were you taking a test like you are today? Did you have to learn the Constitution? I think maybe, and you would probably know better than me, being a lot more of a constitutional scholar. Probably being a U.S. citizen back then meant, and this is probably where we're going with this conversation, Mark, when you hear what I'm about
Mhm.
to say. But being a U.S. citizen then meant you were just present in the United States. If you're here in 1776, you're a U.S. citizen, you're part of this country. And I do see where this is going as far as probably voting rights. I don't know if that's what you were gonna, if
No,
that's
actually, it's by the
okay.
way, that's a great ancillary topic
Well,
related to this, but that's not where I
yeah.
was going. So
Okay.
going back to
Yeah.
1776,
Yeah.
being here in 1776 did not make you a US citizen.
Okay.
By no means did it make you a US citizen. It's very important to remember that about one third of the population of the 13 colonies during the Revolutionary War were loyalists. They either supported or directly fought for and with the Redcoats, the
Hmm.
British crown, the English crown. So there, they were not at the time. They were rebels by definition. So the people who took the first oath to become U.S. citizens were our founding fathers in Philadelphia. Those were the ones who swore allegiance to the United States. Now, if you're asking me specifically what the process was as it filtered out from there or grew from there as becoming a U.S. citizen and being sworn in and taking a test, I don't have the answer to that. But I
Yeah.
can tell you right now, just because you relied on July 3rd, 1776, or July 5th, 1776, did not make you a U.S. citizen. But what we can prove, what we do know, is what makes you a U.S. citizen today.
Hmm.
And the founding fathers were clear. They were clear about what the people meant. The phrase "the people" is used multiple times in the Declaration and in the Constitution. And here is the simple, in my opinion, the clear proof that it only meant people that were citizens in the US, the people, because it never articulates anybody else outside of the limits of our borders. So that's why I believe that this law is not in conflict. Go ahead.
I know. Does the Fifth Amendment only apply to U.S. citizens?
Well, the Fifth Amendment, you're talking about self-incrimination?
Yeah, or any of the other protections that any of. See, I look at the Second Amendment as no different than any of the other rights protections that we have.
Mhm,
Hey, if I'm a cop, I'm gonna love that this world that you're describing, where you have to be a U.S. citizen to enjoy the specific rights of the quote rights of this country.
mhm.
So tell me in your world, does a non-U.S. citizen have Fifth Amendment protections?
Well, yeah, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a
Hmm.
constitutional scholar. I know what I've read. I would imagine that the first thing is that if someone is an illegal immigrant here, if they're not here lawfully, the first thing would be that they don't have any right to stay. So if someone commits a crime, depending on what it is, that they would be deported. That would be the first thing. In other words, something they can't do to you or me, at
Right,
least today,
right.
because we're US citizens. So that would be the first level that I would talk about when it comes to the Fifth Amendment. You don't have the right to stay here. So we're going to move your butt back out of the country or to your home country or someplace else. As far as self-incrimination, that's a good question. It's a question for a constitutional scholar. Now, what I will say I will say is this is that some of these things may have been argued in the Supreme Court or may
Hmm.
have just been things that have not been argued. And so maybe the right to non-self-incrimination has been something that's been enjoyed by non-citizens,
Or
but
search and seizure, or
I still
search and
don't think that
seizure.
yeah, I still don't think that that was the intent
Hmm.
of the founding fathers. I'll finish with this. My belief, by the way, this judge was appointed by Barack Obama, if that
Hmm.
matters to anybody. By the way, there are plenty of conservative appointees or that were appointed by Republican presidents, judges at every level that do things I think are absolutely
Right,
wacko.
right.
So I just want to put that out there as a caveat. So please, I want to see your comments, but I get it. In other words, both sides do weird things. But my belief is, if I had to guess, I would guess that this particular judge is not a huge fan of the Second Amendment. I could be wrong, but we could look
Mhm.
that up and find out. So if that's the case, if I'm right about that, why would she actually say this person, Gary Gunn? I will tell you this, if you read the entire article,
Mhm.
her justification here is here is the craziest part of this. Her justification for this gentleman not being prosecuted, not being criminally liable for possessing a gun is because he hadn't committed any other crimes. That's her justification.
Yeah.
And that to me is, I would say, by the way, the defendant who contended the firearm was possessed for self defense and protection of property during a time of documented civil unrest. This is 2020. In the
Mhm.
spring of 2020, has never been convicted of a felony, a violent crime, or a crime involving the use of a weapon. You've got to be kidding me. There are plenty of people in this country. Listen, in most states, a 17-year-old can't possess a firearm.
This is
They've never
Chicago?
committed a crime, but they still be
Chicago, man?
charged for it.
Is this Chicago?
This is Chicago.
I mean,
My
you know,
belief
I'm gonna tell you what, I understand why this guy's carrying a gun in Chicago, though.
no, by the way, if I were him, first of all, if I
You
were
would also
here,
be carrying a gun
I'd
in
be carrying
Chicago.
a gun too. In other
Yeah.
words, in that particular, I get it.
So
I'm
could the
not,
judge could the judge be saying that, like, "I don't blame this guy for carrying
but
a
it doesn't
gun." I mean
matter. He's still in violation of law,
Mhm.
even if his reasoning is legitimate. Even if you and I believe that he was going to hurt anybody,
Right.
except to defend himself, which he says and she concurs with, it's still a violation
Violation
to
of law.
possess the
Right.
gun. It doesn't matter. Listen, I'm gonna say this. If you have to drive your injured friend to the hospital because he's bleeding out, but you're loaded with 6 beers and a hit of cocaine, and you happen to get stopped, you're still in violation of driving under the influence.
Right.
Now, whether or not a prosecutor wants to prosecute or a judge wants to mitigate, I get all that, but you're
Mhm.
still technically in violation of law. She dropped the case altogether. I just
Mhm.
think that the ruled in his favor. So
Yeah.
my guess is on this, ladies and gentlemen, this is just my guess is this is a person who's not very happy with the Second Amendment as the Supreme Court has ruled on it recently. And this throws, just like we're having right now, this great debate bill,
Mm.
this throws a monkey wrench into the Second Amendment. My guess is that, okay, you want everybody to be able to possess guns with certain caveats and exceptions. Well, so do I. Now illegal immigrants can have them too.
Yeah.
That's my personal belief when I went down here.
I'm gonna say mine is a little bit different. I see this as a foundation for expanding voting rights. So just people keep that in mind. That could be something we see down the road. But by all means, let the chief know in the comments
Please do. By the way, Bill, you and I,
what rights should quote illegal immigrants have? Are they entitled
yeah,
to the same rights as U.S. citizens?